So welcome to the March 26th, 2015 meeting of the Sherburne Board of Selectmen. We're going to ask Dave Williams, our town administrator, to read the agenda, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First, we'll have a public comment, and we have at least one person signed up for that. And then we'll have a poll hearing for 193 Forest Street, and then review ballot questions for the 2015 town election. And then we will do an appointment for registrar submitted by the town clerk, and then discuss the fields at Sherburne and whether the selectmen would like to submit comments to the zoning board of appeals. And then under routine business, we have the fiscal year 2016 omnibus budgets, 2015 annual town meeting capital and warrant articles, town administrator report, selectmen reports, set the next meeting, approval of minutes, approval of warrant, and then an executive session to discuss a complaint regarding a town employee. And that is
Okay.
it.
Any amendments to that? Do we have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Do you have a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor? Aye. Okay, so public comment, I don't know who signed up for that.
Under public comment, we have Jake Solomon from the fire department to talk about the police and fire 5K.
Oh, great.
You got your dog tags,
If you want to come up to the microphone and, you, Jake? Yep, great, thank you.
Yeah, where are our name tags?
Oh, yeah, I don't know where our name tags are. Nobody knows who we are. Are they in the drawer?
I was late. You have to hold it, you can't hold the button. You have to hold it. Yep, thank you. Button's broken. See, now if you do it,
All right.
fix it.
Let's just get this done so Jake can tell us what he's here to tell us. Thanks, go ahead whenever you're ready.
Okay, I just wanted to make the town aware and just give everybody the chance to ask any questions that they may have. On Sunday, April 12th in the morning, the Police Association and the Fire Association are going to be co-hosting our first, or what we hope will be our annual 5K race and fun run. We're going to get started we're going to have people start arriving about 7. We'll hopefully get the race started about 8 or 8:30. Leave maybe an hour, I would say, for the race, and then we originally planned afterward to have some events, games and stuff for kids on Jamison Field. It doesn't look like we're going to be able to do that given the field condition and the winter weather that we've had. So instead of that, we'll probably do a little bit of a smaller thing, maybe just behind the fire station in the parking lot while everybody waits for their race results and all that. A lot of you have probably seen the banner hanging up at the split. We got about, last I checked a couple days ago, there were about 30 people registered already. I'm sure that'll pick up as we get toward the race. We got about 2.5 weeks to go, I think. About 2 weeks, actually. That's it.
Great, thank you. Thanks for the
Yeah, sure. Sorry.
Can you tell us what this is benefiting?
It'll benefit the Police Association and the Sherburne Fire and Rescue Association 50-50 so that we can continue to do events like this in the 4th of July and Memorial Day Parade and events like that we host throughout the year, including the skating rink that we had that was a huge success this past year, and the other things that we do on our own. Officer James Graziano, who's the president of the Police Association, could tell you more about what they would do specifically, but we do things like the Western Ave training grounds that'll go to support funds to continue building the training grounds and the projects we've started down there.
That's great. Yeah, no, thanks. In addition to all the safety and fire protection, you also do a lot for the community that's not directly related to the fire protection. So
Thank
you.
Can I ask if there's a route for this race?
It'll follow the same route as the Pine Hill CSA 5K. I don't know the exact, I couldn't tell you the exact route. I think it goes, Sean may know better than I. I know it goes, I know you never run it.
Perhaps the chairman.
I have not run it. No.
I think it goes on the North Main Street. I think it actually goes up to Pine Hill and then back down. It starts and finishes both on Cemetery Lane.
It's great. Good. Thanks. I hope a lot of people do that. That'll be great.
Yeah, we'd love to, we're in kind of our kind of marketing push. We're getting some help from some of the folks at DS. Some students have expressed interest in helping us get the word out and posting flyers and things like that. So hopefully in the next 2 weeks we'll really up the numbers for registration.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. The next item is a poll hearing for 193 Forest Street. Okay, and I'm going to recuse myself, so Paul, handing you the gavel.
This was advertised for 6:15.
Oh, it's 6:15? Okay, we don't have to do that then. All right, we'll wait till 6:15. I'll retain my gavel, and we can talk about, do you want to just do that appointment? We can do the town clerk registrar appointment, since that's not a time-sensitive item.
I move that we appoint Winifred Williams to be a registrar for a 3-year term.
We have a second on that?
A second.
Okay, and just to explain what we're doing here, there's a registrar whose interim appointment expired in 2014, and the town clerk says that she had overlooked the reappointment, that the registrar had continued to serve pursuant to law, which says you continue to serve until there's a new appointment, and now we're being asked to reappoint her, so we would be reappointing her with a term ending date of April 1st, 2017. So we've had a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Winifred Williams is appointed a registrar.
So how about doing the minutes?
We could start the minutes. That's a great idea, Mr. Durensis.
I'd like to move approval of the minutes of November 20th, December 4th, December 11th, December 18th, December 30th, January 5, January 15, and February 12th.
I will second that, but for discussion, on January 5, we had some changes to what I looked at before, so I would move to approve the original, not the changes, just because I know there was confusion, but I think the original reflects what transpired, not a clear and good explanation of the background of what transpired, so, yeah. So, and that was actually just, I think, the two of us at that meeting.
Yeah, I would second that. So you want to take the other ones, and then we can take January 5th
Sure.
separately?
Sure.
All right, so the motion to approve all the ones Paul just read, other than January 5th. Do we have a second on that motion?
Second.
Okay, further discussion? And Diane, I would just ask, you made the changes you got from everybody, great, okay. So all in favor of those? Aye. Okay, and Peter, you had a question?
Well,
or-
I would just move to approve the original version, and for discussion, and if there's a second, and I have both, Mike, just so you can see.
Okay.
And for discussion purposes, we have a practice, it's not really a policy, but that we have a practice, if we make significant changes to the minutes, we were trying to inform everybody that we made those significant changes, not, I
Okay.
just want to be sure we continue to follow that practice.
What's the date?
The date is
January
January
5th.
5th. Paul.
Looking for that.
It's not a big deal, but, I hadn't looked at the first version until I looked at the packet, and what came to mind was, geez, what it should say is simply what transpired. And the first version has simply what transpired when I went back to find
Right,
it.
rather than the explanatory material,
Yeah,
I agree. I don't
yeah.
think that belongs in the minutes
Yeah.
themselves. I mean, I think it's a fair
It's good
explanation.
information,
but
yeah,
it's
exactly.
not
Yeah,
minutes
it's good
information,
explanation, I
and
understand it and
it doesn't reflect
appreciate it.
what transpired
What
at the
happened.
meeting.
Yeah, that's my point.
And where is the draft?
Um,
Right here. Why don't you just take whatever they gave you for?
Well, the problem with the first set of minutes is that it attributes stuff to me that is not accurate. I wasn't at the meeting, I didn't say any of that.
So what would you suggest as the lead item?
Well, if you're going to have meetings that have things that I've supposedly said, then this is what I actually said to the staff. But I didn't have anything I said to the meeting as a whole.
Well, that's true.
So I would delete either delete the first sentence entirely.
And maybe the first sentence should just be, the chair asked the town clerk to address the question of whether the meeting was properly posted,
Yeah, that-
which is.
simple, and that's what transpired.
Okay, so,
This other version is what I had told the staff.
and that's fair.
So the alternative would be to say the staff informed the board. I don't know if they did or they didn't.
No.
Okay, so then this does not attribute anything to you, Paul. It's just a direct report of what happened.
Thank
Okay? Okay, so with that edit, do we have a second to approve that?
Right.
I can second it. Any further discussion? All in favor on, as modified?
I'm not voting only because
Because you
now
weren't
that
They
you've
were
taken
absent, yes.
Okay.
yeah.
the piece relating to me out, I'm not there at all.
Gotcha. All right, no, that's a fair comment. Okay, good. Well, we got through those minutes. That was a good idea, Paul. All right, we've got about 3 more minutes. David didn't realize how efficient we'd be when he set the agenda.
Yeah, we're banging it out. You want me to do the town administrator report?
Sure, if you think that can be 3 minutes, 4 minutes?
Yeah.
Great, thank you.
Basically, the only thing I wanted to report is that I met with the town auditors today, Melanson and Heath, about a few financial issues, and then he dropped off the FY14 audit books, which is about a couple of months ahead of where we were last year as far as getting the audit done. And also, they are wrapping up the closeout audit that is effective July 31st, 2014, as was requested by the former treasurer. So they're wrapping up that audit.
Great, good. And everything looks good so far?
Yes.
Great.
Yeah.
Okay,
So that's all I had to report.
all right. 2 more minutes. I was going to say, does anybody know any jokes? But then Peter might know a joke, so I don't
Well,
really.
you don't want me to start going down that road.
David, do we have a warrant to sign this week?
Yes.
Okay, so we have I think the town administrator's payroll warrant to sign.
Move approval.
Okay, do we have a second
Second.
on that? Second. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye, okay, we can sign the warrant. Do you have the warrant?
No.
Okay,
I think Diane.
we'll sign it when it shows up. Okay.
Things were going quickly, so I asked Diane to go call town council to come in
It's a good idea.
sooner than.
Yeah, that's a good idea. You know what, I'm going to recuse myself now, and maybe the gentleman from Verizon can make his way over to the table, and you guys can start in a minute.
I'm just going on Verizon time here, 6:14. Oops.
Well, my watch says it's after 6:15. That one
Yeah.
says it's 1 minute off.
Yeah, it's 6:15 now.
I think you're supposed to go by the
Verizon.
room clock, even if it's wrong.
Really?
Yeah.
Really? Wow.
Well, by the time I finish introducing the subject matter, it'll be 6:15. So, we are here to have a public hearing on the installation of a new pole at 193 Forest Street. This was advertised with a legal notice that said that the Board of Selectmen will hold a public hearing on Thursday, March 26, at 6:15 PM at Town Hall, 19 Washington Street, regarding a petition to install a new Verizon New England N-Star electric pole at 193 Forest Street in Sherburne. Oral and written comments are invited. So we are going to officially open the hearing, because it's now 6:15 on the official clock. And so I wonder if you can present what you propose to do.
Yes, sir, thank you very much. My name is Thomas Blickars, for the record. That's B as in boy, Licharz as in zebra. I work for UC Synergetic of Mansfield, Massachusetts. My company provides engineering and rights-of-way services for Verizon. So I'm here on behalf of Verizon to petition for this new pole location. So the story behind this pole is such that there is a new home under construction going to be built. I believe it's number 193 Forest. And the NSTAR needs to place a step-down transformer on the serving pole, which is pole number 3. So the NSTAR asked Verizon to replace that pole with a taller pole. It's Verizon's maintained area, meaning that we will place poles in the town of Sherborne and take them down. So we're going to be improving pole number 3 so NSTAR can place the transformer. At the same time, pole number 3 is on a very severe corner, very severe bend in the road there. It needs to be supported. So back in the day, Verizon placed a wire into the tree across the street, called a guy wire, a tree guy. And so since we're going to be having a truck out there, we're going to take down that tree guy, take it out of the tree, and place a support pole, the stub pole. So this is what I'm petitioning for tonight, is that support pole, that stub pole, which will be used to support the mainline pole, and we'll take the guy out of the tree.
Well, there was a drawing attached to your petition. And when you say pole number 3, I assume you're talking about T3, E3,
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
and that's across the street.
Yep. There are going to be 2 poles placed. One is a replacement pole for pole 3, and there'll be one brand-new one placed, the support pole. We don't need to petition for a replacement because we've already got that location. We've had it. But the new location is for the support pole across the street. That's what we're petitioning for.
And is that the T3S?
3S. Yes, sir.
Okay.
Will the guy wire be any lower than the current guy wire that's in the tree?
Any lower? No.
No, so it'll be at least as
Absolutely.
high above the roadway as that.
We have to be 18 feet across that
Okay,
road, sir.
good, yeah.
Now I'll open it up to the public, since it's a public hearing. Elliot Taylor.
Highway superintendent has looked at this, and
Yes, we have a whole series.
he's satisfied with it.
We have a whole series of reports, but the purpose of the hearing is to get your views, not the views that we already have.
Well, the highway superintendent is satisfied with his proposal, is my question.
Yes.
Yes.
And, then my comment is, there is an underground pipe that goes from Farm Pond to Medfield State Hospital, right under their driveway. And the pipe's down about 20 feet. But I think everybody who's doing anything around that property should be aware of that pipe and just where it is. If you hit it, you're gonna have a nice geyser, and in a couple of days, Farm Pond's gonna go down about 5 feet. So, don't say I didn't warn you.
Thank you. Is there any other comments?
Sir, could you tell me again where that pipe is? It's on,
You want me to speak to that? Because we met with the Verizon.
Well, I
It's
think-
also in your notes, I think, right?
Yeah, and I think we're going to ask the town administrator to summarize the reports from the different town officials, and the fire chief has a lot to say about the pipe, so.
There's a hydrant, fire hydrant,
Yes.
right out at the street,
Yes,
fairly close to your, their driveway.
right.
And just how the pipe goes from there to get to Farm Pond, it's about a quarter of a mile away. I don't know, but before anyone does much down there, they'd better find out just where it is.
We always get DigSafe to come out first to mark out anything that might be underground. How deep would you say that pipe is, sir?
It's down about 20 feet.
20 feet, well, jeepers, we're going to place our pole no more than 5 feet, 5.5 feet in the ground.
Well, people are
So,
gonna be drilling wells and other
Exactly.
things around there. As I say, don't say I didn't warn you.
I will take a note, and I'll turn this back to our construction department, sir. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Is there any other public comment? Okay, then bringing it back to the board. The advertisement for the hearing requested comments both verbally at the hearing and also in writing. We did receive a note from a resident at 211 Farm Road who says he has no objections to the proposal.
Thank you.
And we did have this poll looked at by the CM&D director and the fire chief. And as we've heard already, the CM&D director has signed off on this. But the fire chief had concerns, and so he had set up a meeting with Verizon to talk about this. I wonder if you'd report on that.
Yes, so the fire chief met with Verizon yesterday afternoon to discuss the placement of the new pole. And Verizon is willing to wait until the fire department finishes fixing the Forest Street fire hydrant. So they'll place the pole because the pole will be within the area in which they need to dig for the hydrant. So once they are done with the hydrant project, Verizon will do their work, and Verizon understands that it may be July before they are able to place the new pole due to the time it takes to go out to bid for the project after it's approved at town meeting. So we now have sign off from the CM&D director and the fire chief.
Just to elaborate that, because it sounds like you're not aware of this.
No,
but
sir.
The town of Sherburne has on its plans for improvements to do some work with regard to the drainage pipe
Yep.
that's in this environs, and that's going to require digging up and digging down
I get
to
it.
address that. So because the fire chief is ultimately responsible for that project, the chief was reluctant to sign off until he had this agreement that was just referenced by the town administrator. But having secured the agreement, that means we'll do our work first.
Correct.
We'll get our piece done. And then, if we approve this new location, then you do your work.
Okay, that sounds good.
So nothing we're doing with the fire hydrant and whatnot impacts the location that this
No,
pole
the
is going in,
location's not
right?
going to change.
And one follow-up question, if you could. So the pole's located on the town's right-of-way.
Yes, sir.
Will there be guy wires from that pole to
Yes,
the
sir.
ground?
Yes, sir.
And those will be also
Also in the
just in
public
the right-of-way?
Yep.
Okay.
All we can go back to 6 feet to stay within
The right of
public
way.
Yes,
Got
sir.
it. Thank you.
I have a draft motion.
Is it different than what's here?
It's that plus the contingency for waiting until July.
Okay, we should incorporate that. So why don't you read the motion?
So the motion would be, I move to grant permission to erect a pool, or the town of Sherburne moves to grant permission to erect a pole for the co-location of Verizon and Enstar to be added for 193 Forest Street in accordance with the order for joint pole location and the map provided, and not to be erected until the Forest Street fire hydrant is repaired.
So moved.
And I'll second it. There is a formal
Right.
agreement
And I'm supposed to sign.
I'm suggesting that maybe that language actually be put into that agreement.
It's the order for the joint poll location that you're talking about, Paul?
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense, doesn't it?
Actually put it in writing.
Yeah.
And since you're the clerk and you sign it, I might suggest that right above the words, "I hereby certify that the foregoing order was adopted," we insert the language of the motion.
Okay, so can we do that and then I'll sign them?
You want me to do it?
Yeah,
Do you want me to, I can type it
rather than me write it. You don't want me to write it. I wanted to be a doctor, so you don't want me to write it.
downstairs.
Jeannie Guthrie's offering to type it.
So do you have the wording of the,
Right here.
perfect. Great.
But that presupposes that we voted. So, hearing anything further on this from anybody? Did we ask the fire chief, the police chief to look at it?
I don't believe so. No.
I trust the fire chief.
You haven't been consulted on poll locations in the past, though? Okay.
Okay, then. Shall we vote? All in favor? All opposed? Hey, it passes.
Well done.
2 votes.
So I'll just sign that once she comes up with the right wording, those
Okay.
orders. Yeah.
Yes, Peter, I don't take that stuff with me. That goes
Anyway,
back.
yeah, just so
in
you know, it's in the
mail.
record. I'll be
Back.
signing it, yes.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, sir.
Okay, great. Well done.
We missed you, but
It's okay, it wasn't far. The next item on our agenda is ballot questions for the 2015 town election. And David, maybe you can
Can we pass these down?
walk us through what you're proposing here as the ballot question.
Do we have new ones?
Yes.
Okay, and where did the new ones come from?
The only change was removing the
yeah, I wonder
one
about that.
that addressed the 43C.
Yeah.
So we removed that off because
Okay.
it had been taken off the warrant.
Okay.
It didn't need to be on the warrant.
It's not on the warrant. It was
But it
removed from
didn't-
the
It was
warrant.
removed from the warrant because it was going on the
Ballot.
ballot.
Yeah.
Yeah, so can we explain that? Because I know I'm confused a little bit as to, and people will get to the ballot box and they'll wonder, what is this all about unless we,
Well, the discussion we had when we were talking about the warrant was whether to include
an article.
an article for
Right.
this, and we learned from town council that the way you put this on the
On the
ballot
ballot.
is the selectmen vote to put it on the
Yeah,
ballot,
okay.
rather than on town meeting.
But we were going to have this item on the warrant only as a backup should the article for the bylaw fail.
Right.
And it still has to go to town meeting, but it's certainly got advisory
And
seal
the
of
question was whether this is
approval.
too confusing to put it on the ballot.
I think it is.
Okay, and I thought we got to that point eventually.
Okay, so help me get there again. I'm just, so you can see I can be
it should stay
confused.
on.
Sorry, yeah,
So we have
yeah,
a-
explain.
There's been a whole history of the town having difficulty with
Bylaws.
change, and in particular on government structure, and changes, last-minute changes, and everything else that comes up. So it's always possible that somebody might pull the article or withdraw the article. So this was intended to be, if you pull the article or if we don't get to the article, this fallback that's out there. So we really should address the issue and get it done at town meeting.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it might just slip
We might-
away
yeah.
again to
So,
another
so
year.
I'm there now. I'm with you on this. I think the key is that after town meeting, either way, we have to be very clear about why this is
Vote
going to
for it, yeah.
appear
Or to
on the
vote for it.
ballot and whether they should or shouldn't be voting for it.
Well, there was another issue too, which was, I think, Chapter 43C, doesn't it require a bylaw
Yes.
to implement it? And we would, the issue was whether we would have a bylaw. Almost by definition, if the government task force bylaw fails, and we pass this, we won't have a bylaw until next year anyway.
Until next year, but it gives the government study committee or some, I don't know if they're staying in place for another year or not, but them or their equivalent, a year to perfect the bylaw that maybe was withdrawn or didn't pass at the town meeting.
So what happens if town meeting approves the bylaw that advisory voted favorable action on? Then we say, don't vote for this?
Yeah.
But if they aren't watching, paying attention to one of the best shows on earth, and they vote for it, does the vote become valid?
No, because it needs a bylaw. So you
But
still...
we have a bylaw.
Right, but that's the only bylaw that would be in effect.
It wouldn't, because it doesn't reference 43C.
Right.
Okay.
So if somebody wanted to actually implement that, they would still have to go to town meeting with a bylaw,
The next one.
the next town meeting.
And feedback I've gotten since our last discussion is that that's a very confusing discussion, which may make it more difficult to get through the government task force bylaw, because it becomes an alternative to that. It raises questions about what are we really doing here. Since it doesn't help us this year either way, I'm not sure it's worth putting on this ballot. I mean, if it doesn't pass and we do a special town meeting or something, we can, we can talk about a different bylaw then, and then we can go to next year and pass this. I guess I'm not convinced it's going to benefit us this year, and what I'm hearing from people is it makes things more confusing. And I've heard that from people who watched our meeting, and I've heard it from people on the government task force, and I've heard it from others.
Can I ask you just the logistics? Because a 43C bylaw is required for this to be valid, if I'm simplifying, right?
Yes.
So whether we did this now, it's just an encouragement to go towards 43C, but it's still subject to 43C at the next town meeting, whether it's special or annual, not this one coming up. So
Or never.
Or never, that's right. So the point is more on the lines of, absolutely this is going to be confusing.
Well, the other thing is it creates an opening for somebody who doesn't want the government task force effort to pass to say, look what the selectmen are trying to do. They're trying to sneak in 43C through the ballot. 43C has problems. The Department of Revenue, we've heard this litany from people before. And so it becomes ammunition against the government task force article, which we very much want to pass and which we think is very good for the town and is the next step in this rationalization of the finance department. So I don't, and Paul, I do recall the discussion, and I do recall we said we would put it on the ballot, but I no longer think that that's tactically the right thing to do. I think there's too much of a downside, and it doesn't get us enough at this stage. So that's how I'm feeling about it.
And we can still get there with the next town meeting
I think so.
and ballot.
I think so.
Right?
Well, I can see it's 2-1, so...
Well, but it's, the confusion is what has me hung up. I mean, here, I've sat through the conversations and I'm still confused coming into this meeting.
And we know there's people
And I'm-
who are going to be gunning for the
Right.
task force bylaw to try to say, town's not ready for change, selectmen don't know what they're doing, this is part of a bigger strategy, they're trying to sneak something by us. We've heard all these
Yeah.
crazy comments before, and I just don't want to give people ammunition. I think tactically we make a mistake by doing it, even though in isolation, I'm in favor of doing anything we can to have a consolidated department.
Right.
I've been at this for a long time,
I know.
and I've seen better motion on the glaciers on Mount Rainier. See,
Well, but picture the but it is tactically exactly that. How can you explain this after town meeting, depending upon what happens, or in addition to what happens, on the article that everybody's currently, most people are in favor of?
it's just a fallback, that's all.
Yeah, so it's a fallback that could derail what has good momentum, yeah.
Chuck-
And
Chuck,
can
you
come
guys-
forward again, in the future, so.
Do we want to hear any public comment on this? Chuck, I know you had, and the government study task force had expressed some concern about 43C, correct?
Yeah, we were concerned about, there were several interpretations that were conflicting within DOR. DOR expressed some concerns about ambiguity. If you have to have the bylaw anyway, the fallback, I think that argument is very compelling, the waiting. I don't see anyone withdrawing this year's warrant, and maybe I'm an optimist, but I think it's going to pass. So that then makes it moot, and in any event, without the bylaw, having it on the ballot doesn't accomplish anything. So I think it's confusing enough. I was concerned, particularly a couple of town meetings ago, where there were multiple warrant articles and people were so confused. Tactically, I agree with the views that it's just simpler to have that warrant article that advisory supports, you support, that everyone supports, and I think it's going to pass. So I think it makes it moot. I wouldn't have it on the ballot, but that's my view. That's not the
Understood.
task force view, because
I've also heard that from others on your committee, too. Elliot, you had a thought on this?
Yeah, could you tell me and the TV audience just what this proposal is all about?
I'll do that.
20 words or less.
The general laws contain a series of chapters that provide local option forms of ways to reorganize town government. And one of those chapters creates a finance director and a finance department. We have a bylaw that the Governance Study Committee has put together to do some of what that state law does. The issue before us is a town adopts that statute, which authorizes us to create a finance department and have a finance director, but only to the extent that the town adopts an implementing bylaw. The idea was to have that on the ballot as a fallback, so if town meeting didn't go forward, then the voters at least could say through the ballot question, hey, we want you to do something. Go do a bylaw and come back. It was just intended to be a chance for a wider audience. I think most people who've studied municipal government think that town meeting is often not truly reflective of the voters as a whole. There's usually low turnout and all that sort of thing. I've had communities that have tried to get things passed through town meeting for years, and then in one town they actually put it on the state election ballot during a time that Obama was running for re-election against Mitt Romney, and the question that they couldn't get through town meeting passed overwhelmingly. And there's been a lot of commentary, well, why is it that when all the voters come out they vote differently than town meeting? A lot of analysis as to why and what, but it's a wider audience. It's a group that tends to have less direct interest in the outcome. They're not personally involved in all of politics and all of that sort of thing. So it's a different electorate. So if the first electorate felt, we're not ready for a finance director, it sets up for the wider group to say, hey, all of you town officials, do something. We know that this doesn't actually set up the finance department, but it basically says to you, go find a bylaw and present it.
And then it has to get through town meeting anyway.
It has to go through town meeting anyway.
That's why I don't think this gives us an advantage
I have a
this year. David, what?
I have a concern that if it gets voted down at the ballot, then anytime we bring this up, we're going to hear the broken record about, we already voted this down, why are you bringing this back to us?
I think I'd rather take my chances this year, and if it doesn't go through for some reason, we would put this on hopefully for next year and also have a bylaw on the town meeting warrant next year. for it as special.
Yeah, I think that's where I'm falling out, because even with the explanatory, so the explanatory words that we see here in this first draft, in italics would be part of the ballot question as a means of trying to explain what it is people would be voting on, which only references Chapter 43C of General Laws. Most people wouldn't know what that meant. You see what I'm saying? So, and I don't think yours even shows that. This had,
You're not going
oh, you've got it, okay.
Here.
Yeah. So, you know, it's something that voters would need to be well educated about to vote well on that thing, and I think most people aren't as well in tune with what all this stuff is.
Well, I have great faith in the voters, and in particular the Sherburne voter. There's a lot of really intelligent people in town.
Hopefully only the Sherburne voters would be voting on this.
We
Not
hope,
busing them in.
but you never know.
Voting early and often.
They're still voting in Chicago.
What about, David, these other articles? Some of them are about exemptions from 2.5. I guess they all are exemptions, but they don't have dollars attached. Those dollars get affixed after town meeting, is that right?
You don't
can't-
put the dollars on the
Don't put the
ballot.
dollars in.
Not for a bond issue. But I'm opposed to the last one. We had that discussion with advisory. They did not
Right,
condition their appropriation on a
I agree with that.
Prop 2.5 override.
right.
And we're talking about small bucks, because I'm hoping to convince the board and Ed to use some Chapter 90 funds.
Mhm.
And it's a $95,000 project. This is to do the intersection of Woodland Street and Goulding. And it's one that really ought to get done for safety reasons. And when you put it on the ballot, and you put it last on the ballot, people might very well feel, gee, we spent a lot of money on pickup trucks and the Pine Hill School, and we're spending $1 million on the library. So they get to this and they say, I got to draw the line somewhere. Just,
But wasn't advisory's approval, it was still open to be determined the source,
Yeah, but I don't
which
think it was
included
borrowed.
Chapter 90, no, I have,
No,
it
they said-
included Chapter 90 and up to
and
authorized
borrowing.
borrowing. Yeah, and
But-
borrowing, so
but within the levy limit, not outside the levy limit.
I don't think it's wise to put that on for 2.5 this year.
The 11, I mean, Article 11 that this is referring to does
Yeah.
not have any Prop 2.5 language in it
Now,
at all.
Okay.
Right, it never did. It shouldn't.
This would be in here if advisory's motion added the Prop 2.5 language.
But I wouldn't, I wouldn't.
Well, that, just before you finalize that, because I had another question. We don't have on there the regional school work that was, what, $163,000 or whatever it was, right? And that's because advisory chose to use free cash to fund that. The reason I'm saying more in line with belt and suspenders, that advisory may change their motion, particularly given what we're discovering, you know, and we're discovering, well, oops, our free cash is overstated by $100,000 because of whatever errors in accounting and fund management, and whatever we were doing there, right? So we have less than we thought we had. And so I don't know whether their viewpoint come town meeting may be different, and their motions may be different, both for the school and for this one, Woodland Street, and whether belt and suspenders, we should have them on there, because otherwise they're locked into free cash. And I can't speak to free cash because I don't know where we're at on all they did. I know they talked about it, but I don't have an analysis to reference.
I think those funding sources are still moving around even as of today.
Free cash or otherwise, right? So wouldn't that be consistent with what I'm saying then? Yes? Yeah.
Yes, but I'm opposed to all these ballot questions because they have the effect of raising taxes. And one of the messages that I got out of advisory committee was agreement with, I think, the board that we should be doing all those kinds of ballot questions. And in fact, there was an effort to actually reduce the tax rate that got a round of applause at the Saturday meeting. So to throw on ballot questions, let me phrase it a different way. In the period of time that I've been on the board, I don't put ballot questions on because there's a contingency or as a possibility. Someone has to ask, and that someone has to be advisory. They need to ask for this. Otherwise, I'm not inclined to put any question on there. And I know that they have asked for the top three. That's what they asked for.
Yeah.
They know what the deadline was.
Yeah.
And if they had need of a ballot question,
Well, but here's, we've got
Time
a
is-
town
is at
administrator who's saying that all of those funding sources, or some of those funding sources are in question and thus in play, so.
Well, the last sheet I had was from the 23rd, and under this project, it says Chapter 90 or general fund debt or gift/grant or a combination thereof.
You're talking about Dover Sherman Schools now?
No, this is the
The other one,
Woodland
the first
Goulding
one. Okay,
intersection.
so that's Woodland Gould.
no, he's
Right.
moved on to say, why don't we add a ballot question for the regional schools?
But we heard this weekend, I agree with Paul, we heard this weekend that advisory was prepared to fund that out of free cash.
Yeah,
So
that's
Unless
not,
you're telling me something's different
no,
now?
No, that's my question.
that's solid.
Okay.
That's solid, okay,
Yeah.
so then we don't
And
need
they
that.
haven't come forward. The point I was trying to make is that we thought we had 100 grand more free cash on Saturday than we do today.
Well,
In
one way you can look at it that way,
interpreting what emails I've been seeing.
we have a certified free cash, and there is 100,000 in there
That
that
doesn't belong.
that this year we would appropriate back to the revolving fund.
And then it would go back to free cash next year.
Right. Well, no, it would stay in the revolving fund.
So what goes back next year?
Um,
Oh, we just don't have to transfer
They're-
out?
they're
we
not
wouldn't be
true.
transferring out of the
Transfer
revolving
out of
fund.
the revolving.
They're not true revolving funds is the problem.
Yeah.
So the revenues come in, go to the general fund,
Yeah.
and then have to be appropriated for the expenditures.
Right, the problem is they weren't counted for the last however many years, so we've got these numbers.
Yes, but that's why we have a finance director to help us sort all that
Yeah,
out.
we're discovering these things. It's,
Well, and we had a pretty good margin on Saturday of,
free cash.
Cash was like 1.9 million.
so I don't think we're in danger of falling out, Peter, on any of these things.
Yeah, it's not that number is wrong. It is the certified free cash number.
Yeah.
And we're
Yeah.
need
All right, I
to,
just want to have a brief discussion on that
Yeah.
because it's
So do we have a motion to vote to put the first three items on the ballot in the
So
order
moved.
they appear?
second.
Okay, any further discussion?
Well, just a question about the order. This kind of goes in ascending order of amount.
This was
and
your
I
theory
wonder-
that people are going to get to the end and say we already spent too much. So
That's
now
right.
ease them into it this way.
So the thought, I just want to be sure it's deliberate, that we're going from the
Low to high.
low to high. So we're looking at like 180 to like almost 200 to a million.
It's like an auction, right? Once you get them rolling, they roll.
Yeah, I mean,
I don't.
I'm comfortable with them this way. I don't know what the psychology is of it, but
The alternative would have been to group some of them together, but they don't really fit together.
no.
Trucks don't really fit with the library project or
Well,
the.
and in keeping with the voters of Sherburne are very smart, each of these stands on their own merits, and I think people understand that and would vote regardless of what order they're in.
Okay. I'm ready to
David,
vote.
do we want to say on the, and maybe this isn't the way you say it, in order to make improvements to the Pine Street School, it should be Pine Hill School.
Pine Hill School.
Pine Hill.
Pine Street Inn.
But do we want to say in accordance with their capital plan or something along those lines?
I think we have before.
Yeah, why don't we say that, because that's
The
the,
question has to follow exactly the motion, and so town council writes these. If you add some other words, that means the motion at town meeting has to change. So even though it may seem
well,
clear to you.
I'm wondering if town council wrote this one or not.
These were all written by town council.
Okay. We can still correct street to hill.
Yes.
That's fine. I think it's more explanatory to the voters if we add a reference to the capital plan. It also shows that it's not a willy-nilly kind of expenditure. It's something that's been planned, but we would have to then revise the motion.
Well, let's look at the motion. We have it somewhere.
Paul, do you know the
I can write the motion.
what the law is as far as putting notes on the ballot?
Notes?
Yeah.
None. You can't.
Okay.
Well, but again, in keeping with the voters' intelligence,
Oh, I'm never going to live this one down. You're going to hammer? I'm going to be with this for how many meetings?
I got your number.
What are we looking at?
We're looking for advisory's motions from
Have it.
Saturday.
Looking through this, but I have no
This
idea what I'm
thing?
looking
I think
for.
we're-
On which number? Which
Which was the
project?
Pine Hill School projects? Michael wanted to make a revision.
Well, I'm suggesting it's more explanatory and
I have it here.
clearer.
Let's just see what the article says and what
The motion says, we move that $200,500 be appropriated for improvements at the
What
Pine
article?
Hill School.
Line
Line
7.
7 of Article, what is it, 8?
P7.
Seven.
Article 7. Page 5.
So line 7.
Page 5, Paul Bottom.
We move that $200,500 be appropriated for improvements at the Pine Hill School, and that to meet this appropriation, $2,250 to be transferred from 5-year unspent bond proceeds for Article 19 of the 2004 Annual Town Pine Hill Feasibility Study, and the treasurer, with the approval of the selectmen, be authorized to borrow the balance of $198,250 pursuant to General Laws, Chapter 44, Section 73A, 79, or any other applicable statute, provided, however, that this appropriation
Okay, stop.
We got it.
You can't
Does
make
not
the
say
change.
that. We can't make the change unless this.
It's not in the warrant article, and it's not in their motion. So,
It's
Well,
just
this motion hasn't been
improvements.
voted yet, but yes, I get that. Well, that's fine. Don't change it. I think next year we ought to think about putting in references to what the expenditure is for, more specific than just improvements at Pine Hill School. I don't think that tells the
that's a
voters
good
enough.
point. I can't disagree with you. But if you put in the motion now that it's in accordance with a plan on file with the town clerk, we should have really kind of put it in the warrant.
Pine Hill School, they don't even refer to it as capital improvements. They just say Pine Hill School improvements, and they don't refer to their capital plan or anything. So that should be changed.
Yeah.
Well, it may not be, all be capital. That's another
It's
reason
probably
not to
partly,
make.
it's probably partly not, yeah.
Right.
Okay, fine, good. So we have a motion to
did.
approve these first three
Seconded, yeah.
with the substitution of the word hill. Okay, it's been seconded, all in favor? All right, good, okay, we got a ballot now.
Good job.
All right. The next item is the fields at Sherburne, 247 Washington Street. So this is a agenda item requested a couple of weeks ago, I think, by Mr. Durensis concerning the potential for commenting on a proposed 40B development at 247 Washington Street. The town administrator has solicited comments from Conservation, Planning, Board of Health, Fire Chief, Police Chief, Council on Aging, Traffic Safety Committee, and the Regional School Superintendent. And our pre-meeting packages included the comments that were available at the time of the meeting.
I want to compliment the town administrator putting together this package. It was quite illuminating. I know that we were taking some comfort from the fact that these were two-bedroom units, but it turns out that they have in these units a space called a study, which can and probably will end up being used as a bedroom in many circumstances. So it's not just the two-bedroom possibility, it's also potentially a three-bedroom possibility. We also see in here that the site is very small and constrained with wetlands, and that the overall sense that I got out of reading all the analysis from all of the very fine minds who have looked at this is that this project is too dense for this location, given the environmental restrictions on the site, and in particular its potential to have a much greater impact through the use of this study converting to a third bedroom. Also, the way this thing is designed, it's going to have everybody with their own individual well. The Board of Health is concerned about the environmental aspects of that and wants to see a community well that would be better regulated and safer for all the inhabitants. So there are excellent comments in here, but someone has to say that the emperor has no clothes, if you will, and the part that's not here is the statement that the project is too dense for the site. And I think that's a comment that we can and should make. There is a need in this town for affordable housing. There is a need in this town for diversity. So it's not that we are fighting the concept that there should be affordable housing in the town. But I do think the sum total of the little parts of this, when you put all the pieces together like a jigsaw puzzle, it does turn out to be too big a project at 36 units. And therefore, I would support a effort to suggest that the size and density of the project be reduced. That would relieve the encroachment on the buffer area that's of great concern to the Conservation Commission. It would enhance the safety of the water and sewer systems that have been of concern to the Board of Health. It would be more consistent with the character of our community. So I think it is worth our while to put in comments. And as I say, each of the little pieces don't address the overall issue of density, but if you add all the pieces together, you can see the forest, and the forest is that it's a bit too dense.
So what's the per acre density, do you know? I don't know offhand. I'm not sure, I didn't see it in here, David, but maybe you have information.
It's what, 39 units, 36 units?
36 units, I'm
And
not
it's
sure the total
17
acres.
acres, and 10 of those are
19.
wetlands
10
or
of those are
something
wet.
like
Okay,
that.
that's what I was wondering.
Yeah, in the ballpark, I mean, I don't,
Yeah, yeah,
10 or 11, so
So
it's pretty dense on,
it's about 2 units an
6
acre
or-
if you count
yeah.
the wetlands, but it's much denser if you just count
yeah, it's on like 6 acres of good land, if you will, yeah, buildable land, yeah.
about 6 units an acre.
Yeah. Yeah, so I'm with Paul. I think it's dense. I was very impressed with the level of effort and detail of the work by the Concom Planning, Board of Health, even the Fire Department in their comments to the, Board of Appeals for their meeting. My other thoughts are also kind of tainted by having been in a butter to one of these things, being in a butter. So it won't necessarily impact, but, I worry about as they go forward, the death by 1,000 cuts, I mentioned that before. We see that when the developers keep doing modest changes, that it adds up. My experience would be to recommend that they try to keep to the, you probably more likely you lawyers refer to as the four corners of the 40B permit that ultimately goes out there. My experience in working with the town, there hasn't been a very good single point of contact as an abutter to deal with the town. And what I saw was not a lot of management, control, and enforcement of things like noise, vibration, dirt, dust, traffic, and other nuisances. And maybe with a different team in place, that may change. I don't know what they look at for financial projections. I'm not familiar with those, but presumably those include impacts on, the schools and so forth that reflects that there could be more bedrooms created in these things, and I think we should ask for something like that. I don't know whether, I remember when there was discussion of the talk of what was going to go on Maple Street, that there was an effort to get mitigation dollars out of the developer. I don't know whether that's something to suggest in this situation.
There is a suggestion in here that that would really be under our jurisdiction for the project developer to build a sidewalk from the development
Yeah,
all the way down to Holliston, because there is a sidewalk in Holliston,
yeah,
and that way the people in this development could physically walk to facilities in
Yeah.
Holliston, reducing dependence on the automobile and producing a sidewalk,
Yeah.
which I'm always in favor of sidewalks. So there are proposals in here for outside mitigation. And just to pick up on one of the things that you mentioned, the development across the street from you is 48 units with 12 affordable on a fairly big piece of land.
Yes.
This is 36 on a much smaller, much tighter spot.
Right.
And there's a paragraph here from the planning board that says that the development across the street from you has had only a single sale and about a year of marketing. What evidence is there that there's a market for this style of development in Sherburne? Another incomplete development in an environmentally sensitive area is not a desirable, they have attribute here, but I would say a desirable result for the town. So if you have 36 units that are empty or under construction, much better off if you have 24
Right,
units.
right.
Less risk for the community, less risk for the developer, all of that.
And I guess I can't say whether it's too dense, but I think it's a fair question to ask. I mean, every site's different. This one looks like it has a lot of constraints on it. The other thing the townhouse-style development doesn't do, although that is a style of development that many developments like this use in other places, we know in our town, one of the things we're short of is homes for empty nesters and for seniors, and even including some affordable housing. And it would be nice if at least some of these were first-floor units. And I don't know what style of townhouse this is, whether they're all going to be walk-up units or not, but that's a question I would have also.
So I would suggest, if I may be so bold, is that we task the town administrator to take our thoughts and some of the best from these memos. And he's even suggested a motion. So it's not like I'm singling you out without your giving me the leave to do so. It says, I move to authorize the town administrator to compile and submit comments on behalf of the Board of Selectmen
Yeah, I would say Board of Selectmen.
Yeah.
alongside the conservation and planning correspondence being submitted to the ZBA for this purpose.
And there's one last comment that I had was related to the wells and the water supply, or the impact of that many wells going in to that smaller location, and knowing that there was no real detailed impact studies on the one at Whitney Farms, I would recommend that to the extent that the Board of Health can request that they should get some sort of estimate, analysis. Anything is better than nothing of what all of these straws sticking into the same small piece of land is going to do to everybody else's well water.
Well, I'd like to encourage you towards the idea of, instead of all these buildings with all these straws,
Yeah,
that it really be consolidated into a full-blown public water supply for those buildings.
right.
Because there's better state supervision.
Yes, yeah,
There's, you know what you're drinking, if you will. There'll be testing and so on, whereas all these smaller wells fall below the regulatory thresholds, so that they won't have the kind of protections. And secondly, instead of having all those straws, there'd just be one straw.
right.
Now, that straw might be a little bigger than any one of these others, but the odds are there'd be efficiency of design and impact.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think that's a great approach if we could recommend that, because the other thing that at least I understood was when there's the public water supply type of thing in a development like that, like this, they also have to do some studies of what the impact will be on the abutters' water supply. So that's requiring that, that requirement I think is important to kick into play.
Plus a clear zone
Yeah.
around the well,
Yeah,
called the Zone 1 and then Zone 2 and all that stuff. You want to really make sure, I mean, these are going to be Sherburne residents, and we want them healthy and enjoying their time here and not drinking stuff that they shouldn't be.
The Board of Health memo goes into the location of the wells being kind of packed in close to the buildings, and a public water supply would be a better
Yeah.
Okay.
situation.
Maybe there are comments from the public?
Elliot, you had something, a comment?
Yeah, 2 comments. If this gets a public water supply, the state will monitor the water quality every few months, I believe. Whereas if they're all private wells, once the Board of Health signs off on it, everyone's on their own to see that the water quality is there. And my other comment is, on Maple Street, it was a town meeting vote. Will there be a town meeting vote on this
No,
project?
this is a Chapter 40B project.
Okay.
This is Board of Appeals only. Okay, so that's the motion. We have a second on the
Second.
motion. Okay, any further discussion? All in favor? Aye, well done, Paul and David. Okay, we have to set the next meeting, and I'm unavailable on the 9th of April, which has been suggested as the next meeting, and I'm wondering if we could do another day that week.
What day of the week was that?
Would have been a Thursday, a
Thursday?
typical Thursday, and I would be available, I guess, Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday of that week.
Of that week.
Yeah.
Yeah, Tuesday or Wednesday I could do.
I could do Wednesday, the 8th.
Okay, so
Yeah.
Wednesday, the 8th?
Yeah.
All right, good. That's what we'll do. We'll set the next meeting as Wednesday, the 8th of April. Okay. Great. Okay. All right, any selectmen reports?
Nope.
Okay, any need to discuss the capital and warrant articles, David, or the budget?
No, I think we, the next meeting, we'll want to see who's going to speak on what as far as articles and look at where the funding things settle down and that kind of thing, but
Okay.
there's nothing right now to report on.
Just in terms of the timeline, the advisory report's going out when?
I don't know their exact mailing date.
Does Jeannie know?
It's getting mailed the 17th. It's going to the printer, we hope, before the 10th.
Okay.
It has to be in the households 10 days before town meeting, it would have to be in there on the 18th, which I think is a Saturday. So we'll mail it on Friday the 17th.
So April 17th. And between now and then, advisory's working on their
Yes.
text and their explanations. And
We have a drop dead date of the 10th to get it to the printer.
Okay.
As far as timeline compared to last year, it's still much further ahead, and we're able to see their comments and how they're developing things as opposed to not being included in that.
Good, that's great.
more transparent.
You know, and they're running a very efficient operation over at Advisory, that's for sure. I just had one selectman announcement, which is there was power out for about a tenth of the residents of the town last night, and if anybody is on the feed from the energy company where they text you and tell you what happened, what they said happened this morning was that the town requested that the power be shut down. Well, the reason the town requested it was that the power lines caught on fire, but I guess they didn't want you to know that. So the power lines were on fire. Our crack fire department took care of the issue. There was a downed wire, and this is Mill Street. And there was a downed wire, and then the energy company came out, and they had power on within about 3.5 hours, and we had good police protection during that time. And everything goes on, but I didn't want anybody to be confused that the town was out there shutting the power down for some strange reason.
I saw you out there in the middle of the night.
Okay. The next item we have on our agenda is an executive session that's scheduled, and I have a motion to read, if I can find the
Right here.
motion. David, okay, thank you. Okay. I move that the Board of Selectmen enter into executive session to discuss a complaint filed by a resident as it pertains to Chapter 30A, Section 21A1, and I have determined that discussing this in open session may have a detrimental effect on the town's possible litigating position. The board will not return to public session. I need a second and a roll call vote.
Second.
Okay, the motion's seconded by Mr. Caruso. Having a second, we will now have a roll call vote. Mr. Durensis.
We're going to have any discussion?
We can certainly have discussion.
Well, under discussion, it's my position that where there's a complaint against
Hang on a second.
Another-
Wait till Peter can pay attention. Thanks.
where there's a complaint against another, we should have either both in or neither in. But I don't want to have an executive session with one side or the other. So if we include the complaining party and the complained of party, I'm fine with this motion. If we have neither of them agreeing to attend, then I'm fine with this motion. But I personally would not attend an executive session that meets with only one side of the issue.
Do you have any thoughts on that?
The law requires that we have the employee, that we allow the employee to be present in the executive session. What we need is a chance to talk about what the issues are. But the law requires that we offer that the employee that the complaint's against be present. It doesn't, as I understand it, require that the complainant be present. I appreciate what
Correct.
Paul's saying, but
I'm not
so I
sure
have
it
no
allows
position
it,
on
does it?
that, but.
Does it even allow the complainant to be present?
It can be, because we had done this recently with another department in a similar role, and
But
they
that was
chose not to
internal.
have the complainant present.
Yeah. But we did? the
No,
board?
no, it was a
That was an
different
internal matter?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't feel like we're a tribunal. I feel like we've had a complaint and we're required to give the opportunity to the party who's the subject of the complaint to be there, but I don't see a need to have us turn into a forum or a tribunal where everybody's there. We've had a written complaint. We can address the complaint. If people have questions about the complaint and they need to ask the complainant about it, we can do that in another setting. I know there had been at least some indication that some people might want a investigation or someone, a third party, that would certainly take care of identifying the issues. I'm not sure I'm in favor of spending taxpayer money on that in this case either. But I would not have the complainant in the room.
Paul, I want to make a request because I'm the complainant. Let's stop dancing around this. I'm going to ask you to personally not recuse yourself from this. I appreciate you standing on principle, but this is a decision to be made as to whether or not the town has a moral compass, quite frankly, with all the other things that are involved. That's the big one. You've been a selectman in this town for virtually all the years I've lived here. And quite frankly, nobody would take such a thankless job all those years if you weren't devoted to the community. I think it's important that you participate. I appreciate you standing on principle. I appreciate you presenting it to these folks as an opportunity for me to be in the room. I think I should be, by the way. But don't recuse yourself because I'm not going to be there. You need to be part of the process, Paul. You've been a devoted servant of the community for years. This is a decision about the moral compass of the community. You have to be there, Paul, please.
The reason why I said what I did was because you're not the first person in Sherburne who has complaints, and we've dealt with this issue many times in the past, and we've tried different ways to handle it, including the way proposed here by my colleagues. And my experience is it doesn't really work. It's not fair to the person who is complaining because you don't know what's going on. It's not fair to the person who's complained of because it puts them in a terrible position. And having made all those mistakes in the past, I really don't want to see the board make the same mistake again. That's where I'm coming from. It's not related to your particular complaint.
But that's my point, it needs to be, because my particular complaint is something bigger than nickels and dimes. It's whether or not the town thinks it's all right for their police chief to be messing around with a married woman in town while he's on duty. Call it out loud, for God's sakes. This is not a small item. Everybody prides themselves on this Sherborne being a wonderful community to raise your family. Up until this, I would have agreed.
I think this is why we want to be in executive session. for this
Okay, well
discussion.
then, you know what, Mike, you shouldn't try to block it out, you shouldn't make it so that one of your colleagues doesn't want
I'm
to
not blocking
participate.
anything. I'm not making it so Paul's free to participate, Bruce.
I understand.
Okay. And I think you urged him to, and you made an eloquent plea for him to be in the room,
I
so.
think it's very important, and I quite frankly don't see why you wouldn't want me to be part of the conversation.
At some point, it might be appropriate. I don't think at this instance it's appropriate. I'm completely uncomfortable with the subject of this complaint also because I think there are some town issues here and some issues that aren't town issues, but we have to deal with those in the executive session.
Well, I appreciate it, I said what I had, and I mean it all. For all the years that you've been a selectman, in both your fans and your critics, and anybody in politics as both, I don't know if anybody would challenge the fact that you've been devoted to the community. And I'm not saying that in a patronizing way. I've been a critic of many of your politics over the years too. But you've been devoted to the community. It's important. So however it plays out, whether I'm part of it or not, Paul, I appreciate it if you'd stay part of the group and participate.
This is such an old-fashioned way of doing it. Oh, my God. I really think you should invite him in.
Do you want to
I
hear?
think we need to have a discussion first in executive session.
Yeah.
What do you mean you can't?
I mean, you should talk to council about.
I think we can have a discussion without deliberating, correct? Without what? Deliberating. In other words, we can have a discussion about the procedure as long as we're not deliberating about the complaint. That's how I understand the statute. Is that not right?
When I say we should have it first, I mean we should have it first in accordance with the law, which,
Oh, I see.
you see, it says nothing about, we haven't had a conversation. We got to
Don't
get
you
to
see
that
how
point.
unfair it is on anybody's complaint? Let's say you had a complaint. Let's say you're a private citizen. You come to the board, and then suddenly we're meeting with the person that you're complaining about, and you're outside. What are we doing in there?
Well, the statute was written that way for a reason, Paul, and I couldn't tell
To
you what it is.
protect the employee, yes,
Okay.
but it doesn't preclude us being fair to everybody. And when somebody has a complaint, I mean, I've been there, I've done that, I've seen so many people with grievances and complaints. If you exclude them from the process and you don't tell them what's going on, all they do is get mad. They don't go away, they get mad. And they feel like, what is the board doing in there with the person that I'm complaining about? It destroys our own credibility as a board. Whereas if you have the person there, you can see what's going on. He doesn't have to participate. You don't have to have him speak. But at least he knows what we're doing with his complaint. I think it's a dreadful mistake to exclude the complaining party.
I've never been through this before, so I don't know what to say, other than we have a complaint, we're going to talk about it. We're required to talk about it with the employee present because that's the law. But what I'm anxious to do is talk about it, and an outcome may be, okay, now we're ready to have everybody in the room. I'm not, I'm not totally objecting to having everybody in the room, but I don't know what we do when we get in the room, quite frankly. I know we have a thick stack of stuff that we're going to be talking about. That is the complaint.
I don't
And
want to
we're-
talk about all that thick stuff. I mean, I started to read this stuff, and
Well, we can't talk about that till we get in the executive session.
this to me is such a no-brainer. I mean, I don't like being put in the position where I feel like it's wrong for me to attend the meeting. But I do feel it's wrong for me to attend the meeting. But for all the reasons that were stated, I should be there to represent all the people that I represent. But I don't think anybody would want that kind of perception. If you have a lawsuit, do you want to see the judge meeting with the party you're suing in his chambers without you? That's what it is.
This isn't a lawsuit, Paul. It could have been brought as a lawsuit, in which case it wouldn't be spending the Board of Selectmen's time on it. And we wouldn't have an executive session, and it would be handled however it was handled. I mean, and that's why I say, I think this complaint has little to do with the town as I read it. But, others can disagree. That's fine. I have a suggestion, which is that Peter sounds like he's open after an initial discussion to potentially having the complainant come in the room. Why don't we meet and see if that happens? And if it doesn't happen and you want to leave, leave. But at least we have, a session where we can get to that question.
Because the employee is entitled to attend, the employee will bring counsel. And
Can I ask you,
That
because
whole-
you're the expert on this type of law, Paul. Regardless of whether the employee and the counsel is in the room, we're the ones having the conversation. Isn't that correct? I mean,
Yeah, it's any other participation or discussion in the room is at the recognition of the chair.
okay.
Just one point, the employee does have a right to speak on his own behalf.
Oh, okay.
So then we're in a session where we're, mediating a dispute between two individuals, and what we're supposed to be doing is inquiring whether there was a violation of an
Of town, yes.
employment policy or
Right.
employment duties.
Right.
But you're doing that without ever hearing from the complaining party.
We have.
We have 90 pages from the complaining party. Paul.
I understand you have 90 pages. The point is, I had asked in the beginning, and copied you all, for this to be sent out, to have somebody take a look at it and bring it back a recommendation. If there's no merit to the complaint,
We didn't
have somebody say it.
We didn't have a session, a public session, where that was asked. It was asked by email. You know as well as anybody that you can't deliberate by email as a Board of Selectmen.
The board doesn't need to deliberate. He can do it.
And what I responded was,
expect-
I can't go out and hire any outside counsel without the permission of the Board of Selectmen.
This will never end for the town employee. It'll just go on and on unless you follow the usual things that the town of Sherburne has figured out how to do decades ago.
But even going down that road of the investigation, I would expect that I would have weighed in on that in executive session, that that's a route to go down.
We haven't
Because
had
we've
that
done that in the
discussion.
past in other situations of resident complaints about other folks in town, and we've,
So let's have the discussion in open session. If the subject is, when a complaint comes in, should it be looked at and evaluated by somebody and not just dumped on the Board of Selectmen and have us try and figure out what's the truth in all these pages? That's not a way to run a ship.
well, I'd like to hear from our counsel, whom I presume has reviewed the complaint and is here tonight, to be able to weigh in on what he thinks about the merits of the complaint and how it impacts the town. That's part of what I'd like to hear and learn about tonight. And I'd like to hear your viewpoint and your viewpoint about what you read versus how I read what I read. And that's, I think, the purpose of executive session. And an outcome from that is, yes, we need to hire an investigator, and we need to find money in the budget to do that, or not.
And with the
Another
scope of the
outcome-
investigation.
Yes, and another outcome may be, okay, we should now have another executive session or a continuation of this executive session after a brief recess to invite the complainant in. That's the type of stuff that I would expect we would address in executive session. But until we get to executive session, I'm not prepared to do anything. And we'll drag it on.
I don't think a board who's going to have to make a decision should meet privately with any one side on that subject and hear only from one side. It sends a terrible message to the public. It sends a terrible message to anybody and everybody who has a complaint.
We aren't hearing from one side. We have a staff from one side already. We have yet to hear from the other side.
So the
I
purpose of
respect the
this-
fact that this has dragged on a long time. I think we've not done a very good job of communicating the status of this to the complainant, nor to the person that has the complaint registered against. But here we are. Let's get the ball rolling.
I'm prepared to have an executive session as long as both sides are present.
I have to take a roll call vote. So you want to have the vote now, or are we still talking about it?
Well, I'd like to convince one or two of you.
I'm with Peter on this, Paul. He voiced exactly how I think this should play out. Which is, I'm not inherently opposed to any of the options that Peter laid out, but I don't think we should start there.
The only other alternative about Paul talking about an outside person is if the board did authorize me to go outside and get somebody and who would produce a report and bring back to you. But I didn't think that there was any.
I don't think our track record on that is particularly good, and I think it's been very expensive. And I don't, just speaking only for myself and without benefit of any further discussion, I wouldn't want somebody to investigate that entire complaint, because I'm not sure that all those issues are pertinent to the town or worth spending town money on. So,
But in order to bring closure for the employee, in order to bring closure for the complaining party, there has to be something that's a little more than what you just said. You're not doing any favors for anybody by taking that position.
I disagree, Paul. I'm very comfortable with what Peter laid out as an approach.
The way we've handled these complaints in the past is that we have the town administrator have somebody take a look at it. Sometimes it's the town council, sometimes it's somebody else. They take a look at it, and they come back and they can say, there's no merit here. And then we got a report that says, here. Or they come back and say, this warrants
I think
a serious look.
I think that's why I put it forward that it should be discussed in executive session. If it wasn't warranted, a discussion about it, I wouldn't have put it forward to requesting the board to meet an executive session to discuss it.
As Peter said before, I think we have to have that discussion in executive session. Whether we hire an investigator and what we ask them to investigate and who the investigator is, that's all stuff we need to decide.
That's what you got a town administrator for, I'd say first, number one. But my point is a much smaller point, which is rather than meeting with one side, listening to one side and his lawyer and all that kind of stuff. Have both sides in there. One can at least know what's going on, the other one can speak. It's a fair process, visually to the public. They can see transparency, they can see complaints being addressed. But just going off and meeting with one side, it's bad practice. And it's not, this isn't a comment about this particular complaint. This is the way all complaints I'd want to see handled, not just this one. And that's the way the town's handled them in the past. This should,
And this pertains to what kind of complaints, Paul, the town has handled it? Handled which kind of complaints like that? Just employee complaints? Complaints about employees?
we've had the whole gauntlet.
If it has been that way, it's been with prior administrator and prior council,
Yes.
because
Yep. I agree.
not with, under this council.
Mike, I think it's fair to say that the nature of this complaint hasn't happened before, and it's likely not going to happen again. It's a pretty unique situation.
I don't think it has anything to do with the nature of the complaint. It's a complaint against an employee that you chose to bring to the Board of Selectmen.
That's right. And by the way, you said it's not a lawsuit, you're talking about money. I had plenty of people suggest make it a lawsuit, but number one, I don't want to waste money on lawyers. Number two, I don't want to have you waste money on lawyers. And most importantly, I'm not looking for a shakedown. I'm not looking for the town to come up with money. I'm just looking for right and wrong to be addressed and identified, and then have the chief accountable for his behavior, plain and simple. You guys are overthinking this big time because you're afraid he's going to sue you. I'm not going to sue you.
That hasn't crossed my
Yeah, it
mind.
doesn't cross my mind either, Bruce.
Well, it hasn't. That's why he's sitting here with his lawyer and you know.
Bruce, I've let you go on. You actually don't have a right to talk during our meeting either.
Well,
I've been courteous and let you go on, but don't get insulting.
I'm just speaking it like it is.
We told you that was not what's motivating us. You are being insulting if you think we're trying to protect ourselves.
Then what's wrong with addressing it?
Yeah, we want to address it in the executive session. That's what we just said. I think you've asked Paul to attend also, so I really don't know what the whole
Mike,
opinion
you
here
talk
is.
here back and forth in open discussion about should we hire somebody, should we not, should we get a lawyer, should we not. Why do you hire a lawyer unless you're trying to protect something? Come on, Mike, you're a lawyer.
Why would you hire a lawyer? I don't even know what you're talking about, Bruce. This even reinforces my thought that this is not something that the Sherburne Board of Selectmen should be dealing with.
You should.
I don't know, Bruce. I don't know.
I can't believe that you think that this has nothing to do with the town. I really can't believe
I
that.
think there are elements of your complaint that are legitimate town elements and other elements that aren't. And that's all I'm going to say about it in this session.
That's fair.
Okay? And we want to get to the session to actually have that discussion.
But see, that's a perfect example why the complaining party should be present. So you can have that discussion with him in the privacy where the employee is protected, rather than having it out here. And don't think that by going to executive session that you are going to avoid having to have that conversation with the complaining party, because that's going to happen, whether it happens on the street or happens.
Happy to have that conversation with the complaining party, Paul.
So why not have it all there together?
Because we're still going to have it with the complaining party. I mean, we're still going to have the conversation. He's going to have the conversation if he wants to have the conversation. I don't think it changes anything.
Well, I think it does. My experience with handling complaints generally, and not this particular complaint, I'm talking systems, procedure, and organization. The way you handle complaints, whether they're good complaints or bad complaints and so on, is you don't meet privately with one side or the other.
But we're meeting with ourselves. And the law requires allowing what we're doing with the one side.
Yeah, just as
Yes,
soon
to
meet without
speak.
anybody in the room.
Yeah, I would prefer to as well.
But he's also allowed to address us and
Yes,
so
no, I
on,
get all that.
and counsel and so on, and these things typically turn into what they turn into.
Can you address that? What's the scope of what they're allowed to address, Chris? Well, what the complaint party and the council are allowed to address in an executive session for this.
The subject of the complaint has the right to attend the session.
Yes.
They have the right to speak on their own behalf.
In what context? In other words, if the board were deliberating about whether to hire an investigator, or if the board were deliberating on the scope of such an investigation, or if the board were deliberating whether to have a discussion with the complainant in the room, that doesn't deal with the merits of the complaint. Is the complainant still entitled to speak?
I would suggest that he does not speak.
All right, then maybe I'm going to change my mind and just have everybody in the room then, because that doesn't seem fair either.
I mean, they have a right to speak on their own behalf regarding the discussion, so, I don't think that there's anything in the statute that limits what they can speak about.
So now we're in a near mediation role?
Yeah, right, exactly. That's why this is so inappropriate. Yeah.
It doesn't have to be that way. The way we try to solve these things in the past is we have somebody who's not involved take a look at things when complaints come in, and they write a memo.
Well, we don't have that memo, but we have counsel who's looked at this stuff.
Not
I
only
can't
that,
wait
Paul,
to hear
if
from
we
him.
had the memo, we'd still be talking about it in an executive session with both sides present under your...
Yeah, but then we'd be in a position to make a decision. But
Right, but we will have spent $10,000 of the town's money on a private complaint. So,
don't think we need to spend $10,000. Let me put it another way. If you don't do that, there'll be no peace on either side. The war will go on.
I'm not saying we're not going to get to that point, but I think we should at least have an initial discussion. I don't think we can do that based on an email to David asking him to do it. I think we have to have that discussion. And I think that the taxpayers' money deserves some deference here, too. I mean, this is something that was thrust upon us. It's not something we went out looking for. It was thrust upon us, and it's going to cost the taxpayers money. It's already cost us time.
We get complaints all the time.
We may get complaints all the time. This is the very first time in 2 years that we've gotten to this point. So any of these other complaints that we get all the time haven't risen to this level or gotten to this stage. And they also haven't resulted in a council report, other than one complaint, which you're aware of, which did not involve an employee, it involved a consultant, and the complaining party was not invited in the room by you or anybody else.
We didn't invite either side in.
Exactly right.
That's the kind of meeting, if the town employee has a right to be there, but he also can choose not to be there. So if you, that's how you get to that kind of meeting. But if the town employee is going to be in the meeting, then I think for appearance's sake, that you need to have both sides.
Where are you in this?
It better protects the employee, it better protects the town, and
The burden of managing the meeting with all parties in the room falls on you, my friend.
Absolutely, which is why I came out the way I did
Yes.
initially. It
Yeah.
doesn't seem like an appropriate role for the Board of Selectmen to be
Right.
playing
Right.
at all.
I can't speak to past practice except for the most recent practice which we precluded others from being in the room, quite frankly.
But that was a consultant who didn't have the
It
right
was
to
a
be.
consultant and a board that asked to be in the room, and we did not have them in the room.
And we couldn't legally have them.
The
That may be the case.
consultant was considered, it's under the same law, considered as the employee under the statute.
So the consultant decided not to be in the room.
I think the exemption cited is a different one because
Yeah, the exemption.
of the nature of the complaint.
Gotcha.
It was different than what the Board of Health exemption was.
Okay, but all I'm saying is, so I can only speak to what I know, and we did an investigation in something else, but that wasn't that there's a policy nor a practice established that says go do an investigation. We may decide that that's something we want to do based on what we're dealing with here. So I'm just going to say the same thing I said before. I'll go, if you want to have the free-for-all in the room, fine, let's have the free-for-all.
It doesn't need to be a free-for-all.
Well, I don't know what it's going to be, but it suggests,
Yeah, I mean, it really does, Paul. If you've got one side that's entitled to speak,
Yeah.
and you've got the other side in the room, and the other side is going to want to speak.
You don't have to recognize them.
I didn't recognize him today, and he's already talked more than anybody up here at the table. So, I think that
I just
works.
want to get to where we talk about this, address it, enable whatever we're supposed to do under the law. I'm cognizant of there are two sides to every story, and we'll get to.
I just think it's a fair, let me put it this way, my standards of fairness is, I'm the father of 7 kids. My standard is when one kid comes to me and said, she did this to me, and I bring them all together, and I hear
Do
what
they
they
have
all have to
counsel,
say.
or they're on their own?
But you see,
We'll hire you, Mike.
But
I want that job.
but that becomes unfair to us, Paul, because we're not the referees in a situation
Well,
like
that's just
this.
it. That's just it.
That's where I'm most
Why
uncomfortable.
would we be
All-
refereeing?
Well, under that example of the kids, that's what you're in part doing. You're mediating
Trying to
a
find
situation.
justice.
Trying to find justice. There you go. I'm not a justice finder.
Yeah, I don't think I'm a justice finder either. That's not what this is about.
I mean, we may get to where we got to find justice. I don't know, because
Here's
we
a
haven't talked about
complaint
it.
that's
other than
months
this,
old.
whether we have
It's
the
never
number.
been investigated. We're going to have a meeting now with one side. We've gotten 90 pages of materials from one side. Don't you think that it's a better use of everybody's time and the government's time for it to have gone to somebody competent who doesn't know who any of the players are, who takes a look at it and says, in my judgment, this is no good, dismiss it, or in my judgment, this is serious business? Are you going to make that decision?
No, that's why we have town council, and town council's in
Town
the
council
room.
doesn't make those decisions.
No, but they advise us on what the next steps are, and they look at materials, looking out for the town's best interests in a situation. Not an individual, not a complainant, not our best interest, but the town's best interest. That's what I want to hear. If the town council wrote an opinion, and I wish we had asked town council to write an opinion about the merits of this complaint, and we had that, we wouldn't release that unless we voted on it.
Right, but I was asking for that kind of stuff, and we don't have it.
We don't. But we have council, and we have a room that we can go into, and we can hear what council has to say.
But if we do that, then we have to invite one side,
I understand.
and then I'm saying if you invite one side, then you should invite the other. Council could have sent us a memo at any time.
You
He
must
does
be a-
send us memos all the time.
You must be
So
a lawyer, you're so persistent.
it's the perception of fairness.
I appreciate that. And I don't think anybody up here is trying to do anything but what's fair to all parties involved. But
How about
there are
we call a recess
steps.
and I go talk with counsel by myself?
Okay, that'd be great.
We're recessed.
I think these have to be signed by all of us. There's 3 of them, Paul.
Before. We've had a long discussion. I think the next thing I have to do is take a roll call vote on the motion to go into executive session. Mr. Durensis,
No.
Mr. Caruso,
Yes.
and Mr. Jarmo is yes. Having passed by a vote of 2-1, the open session is now closed. We will not be returning to public session. We are now in executive session.